Good morning, everyone. It's Reverend Charlotte here. Just in case you don't recognize me out of uniform, you know, still here, just not on at the moment. So we're now into week 2 of this lockdown, this shutdown of most of us, other than those of us who are obviously key workers, being asked to stay at home. And I wonder how you're coping with it at this moment in time. Are you perhaps feeling isolated, stuck, climbing the walls? Do you by chance have children who you are maybe trying to keep calm, keep occupied, while also to explain to them what's going on? Or on the flip side of things, are you perhaps suddenly surrounded by a noisy, busy family and struggling to be able to cope with that much together time? Or, of course, maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum and you live alone and are really and truly feeling the isolation through not being able to go out and do your daily activities that you would normally do. Well, regardless of how you're actually coping with the situation at the moment, there's something that I wanted to come on and to talk about today. Because in the last few days, I've seen a trend, I suppose you could say, developing in the news, on social media, online, of many people throwing themselves into a flurry of activity, a whirlwind of activity, as in they can't do their normal daily activities, so they're finding something else to do instead. Some people are managing to do that very successfully. Others aren't. And for those people who perhaps aren't managing to do that, but who are remotely watching and looking at the flurry of activity of other people, it can be really very easy to beat yourself up, to be thinking, well, hang on a second, this person has managed to achieve all of this sort of thing. Why can't I? Well, today I wanted to talk a little bit about trauma responses and about how maybe you might be reacting during this current situation, and maybe to explain a little bit about why. So I'm going to read a couple of things for you today that might just give you a little bit of food for thought. So bear with me while in the background I bring those things up on my screen. The first one is this. It was posted on Twitter by Matt Haig, who many of you will know is an author who writes an awful lot about mental health, having been very open about his own issues with mental health in the past, both online and also in some of his published works. And he's posted this. The current era is crap enough without having to feel guilt that we aren't learning Greek and painting watercolors of daffodils. If you brushed your teeth today and got showered and ate something and spent 10 minutes not looking at the news, then well done. That's an achievement. Because the thing is, in the midst of all of this flurry of activity that many of us are seeing around us, there are just as many, I think, who are struggling to get up, to get dressed, to brush your teeth, to get out of bed or to get off the sofa. And actually what I wanted to say is that that's okay. It's not actually unusual in a situation like this. You see, our brains are hardwired to have certain responses to fear, to trauma, to, yes, a word you've heard an awful lot about lately, unprecedented events. Many of us will be familiar with the concept of fight or flight, that when we feel like we're in danger, when we feel cornered, we either run away or we fight back. But there's something else that is just as much a part of that sort of trauma-based research, but doesn't necessarily receive quite as much of an airing as the fight or flight stuff does. And that's freeze. So this is another thing that was posted by a Twitter account. I don't actually know who wrote it in the first place because the person who posted it made it clear it wasn't her own post, so I can't credit who wrote it. But it's still, I think, very profound, and it goes like this. Do you want to know why you feel so tired, even though your daily activity load is decreased? It's a trauma response. Because you can't fight the virus actively, and because you can't run away from it, your body is going into play dead mode. It's common in those who have experienced ongoing trauma in their childhoods. And in many senses, it's happening to us now. We're powerless. Fight or flight is out, so the only coping strategy left is avoidance. So be kind to your body that needs a few extra naps right now. You're processing a lot, even if it isn't consciously. Be active when you can, but don't force it. You're coping and you're healing. And that concept, the freeze scenario, it actually reminds me of some principles that I was taught as a child. Now, many of you might know that I grew up in Canada, in rural Canada, and in that particular part of the world, wild animals are just a part of life. They're normal, they're all around us. It's not unusual to see footage on the news of grizzly bears coming into towns and raiding people's rubbish bins, that sort of thing. And so because that's a normal part of life, it's also part of daily conversations, part of education, of if you ever find yourself in a situation of being confronted by a dangerous wild animal, what do you do? Now, as I was reading that last message that I just read about freezing in the face of trauma, it occurred to me that what I was taught as a child is, heaven forbid, if you ever find yourself in the wilderness, faced with a bear, you should never run, because the bear will run after you. You definitely can't fight back because it will be an awful lot stronger than you. So the best possible way to survive the situation is to freeze, is to lie down and play dead. It's perfectly possible that the bear will still injure you. It might still attack you, but it's much less likely to kill you. Now, I appreciate that is very extraordinary words to be saying, but as I say, that was part of my childhood. It's how I grew up. And the thing is, in this particular scenario, many of us will feel as though there is a danger chasing us. There's a danger that however much we might like to, we can't get away from. We can't fight back because the virus is invisible. We can't run away from it because obviously we have to stay in our homes. And so the advice we're being given is freeze, lie down, stay where you are. And that can feel scary because we're vulnerable. But that's why for so many of us, our bodies, our minds, our hearts are effectively shutting down, are needing to rest, or finding it difficult to get up, to get dressed, to function in the way that we normally would. And that's why in the message that I read the first time, it's perfectly okay if the most that you can manage right now is to get up, to brush your teeth, and to do something other than to watch the news. And of course, for those of us who have people who are dependent on us, vulnerable children, then of course we need to make sure that their needs are met. But beyond that, if you need to take extra naps right now, if you need to spend time vegging out on the sofa, if it just feels like far too much to be productive and to throw yourself into extra work or different work, as in if you have the type of workplace who at one point you might have gone into an office and now somehow you feel as though you have to replicate all of that work at home while learning a whole new skill set of trying to do it online, trying to maybe make videos or do video conferencing calls instead of being able to talk to people face to face. That's a huge amount of pressure. Some people are managing it very, very well, and to those people who are, fantastic, go for it, that's great. Feel free to learn how to paint a daffodil, to learn Greek, to whatever else it is that you're doing. If you are able to continue working on a thesis from home, to be able to have a meeting with colleagues via Zoom, great, go for it. But if for you that feels like too much, and if you feel as though you just can't manage it, and your heart and your mind are fighting back of saying, no, I need to stop, I need to rest, then give yourself permission to do that, because it's okay. There's another section that I would like to read. This is from an article that was published in Psychology Today magazine, and it's very much along this principle. What I'm about to read is a little bit lengthy, so bear with me, but I hope you'll understand why I'm reading it as I go through it. We celebrate innovation around connecting. How did it never occur to my husband or myself to have video distance dinners with far-flung loved ones? Suddenly we have more time for meaningful conversations with people we haven't had time for in years. Many have shared that this experience is teaching us, like a slap to the face, what matters most. We profoundly appreciate those things we so took for granted. These insights are all good, of course. But when the novelty of all of this started to wear off, and the inspirational examples piled up, it felt as if possibilities turned into pressure. Now that so many of us are confined to our homes, we have to do important, fun, or creative things. We can use the extra time to take courses, create works of art, write books, redecorate. We shouldn't waste a moment of the gift of confinement. We must make the most of it all. Ideally, it should all be delightfully Instagrammable as well. I believe that in addition to celebrating the gritty human drive to rise above our circumstances, we need to give each other permission to grieve, to be afraid, to sit with our emotions, to slow down, to slow way down if we need to and are able to. There's nothing wrong with being productive or creative. It can be a helpful, constructive way to cope. But we must also allow ourselves space to not be amazing. Our world has not faced anything like this in over a century. It's big. It's okay, even appropriate, to not be okay. Some people may feel like failures because they're not sufficiently seizing the moment within this pandemic, because they are struggling to cope. I have felt this way at times. If you're tapping into fresh reservoirs of strength and inspiration, celebrate that. You can use your energy to help others. But if you're really struggling as you watch it all unfold, feeling fear as this thing marches closer, or mourning your own real losses, this is a normal reaction. I prefer to be a hero, one who rises above circumstances to encourage and to help others. We need our heroes, that's for sure. But sometimes we must simply allow ourselves to be human, to be humbled by a situation, to grieve what's happening, to not know what to do next, to be messy, to handle things imperfectly, to not have anything Instagrammable to share with the world right now. And that article that I've just quoted from at length is from psychologytoday.com. It was written by Susan Bialy-Haas, MD, and it's called COVID-19, It's Okay to Feel Overwhelmed and Be Unproductive, just in case you'd like to be able to find the rest of it for yourself. So, in a spiritual sense, what, if you need to, can you do right now to be able to deal with some of those questions, to be able to find space, to rest, to find some answers perhaps, to engage with God if that's what you need to do, to be able to still find spiritual sustenance, shall we say, despite the fact that all of our places of worship are closed? Well, there are all sorts of resources that are available online from many clergy who are working very, very hard to put things online to make them available. As you will see, sometimes I'm able to do that, sometimes I'm not. I'm actually quite amazed that my autistic son hasn't interrupted so far, but anything could happen. But if there's something that you need to be able to do quietly from your home, from your sofa, even from your bed, then there's a couple of things that I'd like to recommend to you as options, as resources. So those of you who have internet access, there is a live link every day to prayers from Thésée. This is the monastery in France, which is from the Roman Catholic tradition, And they pray using a lot of solitude, a lot of quietness, a lot of very, very restful, soothing music. It's the sort of thing that you can just put on in the background and just be. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to follow along. You can just let it sort of wash over you. And I personally find that to be very restful. Maybe you're the sort of person who wants to be able to think a little bit more about the Bible, to spend time with God in prayer that way, but maybe it's difficult right now to actually open the Bible and to read things or to do a concentrated prayer time. Well, if that's the case, but you want something, then there's all sorts of apps that you can download that can allow you to engage with a form of Christian meditation. So 2 of these apps that I use every day, both of which are available free. One of them is called Pray As You Go, and it's a very short time, maybe about 10 minutes or so, that has a little bit of music, it has a little bit of scripture, it has some questions to get you thinking, but you just have to be. You just have to listen. The other one that I also like, it's an American app, it's called Abide, and that one is available with all sorts of different options. The free version runs to about 2 minutes worth of music, scripture, and meditation. If you choose to subscribe, then you can get anything up to 15 minutes. And they also offer all sorts of soothing music that you can fall asleep to with timer settings, that kind of thing. And you will also find, if you want to search for it, that many churches, both locally and nationally, are also putting worship online to stream if you want to be able to listen to and engage with those. But the key thing I guess I wanted to say in all of this is, if you're managing to be productive in this time, if you're managing to do stuff in a different way, great, go for it. That's fantastic. But if you're one of the people who can't, if you're one of the people who, whether you would like it or not, finds your body, your mind, your heart, your soul just slowing down and saying, I can't do anything, I can't even some days get out of PJs, well, that's okay too. Give yourself permission to slow down. Give yourself permission just to be. So just before I finish today, I'd like to read a prayer that I have in one of my prayer books. And it is a prayer that was written for a major life transition. And that seems kind of appropriate right now because that's really what we're all going through. So this is it. Lord, help me now to unclutter my life, to organize myself in the direction of simplicity. Lord, teach me to listen to my heart. Teach me to welcome change instead of fearing it. Lord, I give you these stirrings inside me. I give you my discontent. I give you my restlessness. I give you my doubt. I give you my despair. I give you all the longings I hold inside. Help me to listen to these signs of change, of growth. Help me to listen seriously and follow where they lead through the breathtaking, empty space of an open door. Amen. Whatever it is that you're up to today in the coming days, whether it's something or whether it's nothing, I hope that somehow you do manage to encounter something of the mystery of God. And most of all, be kind to yourself. It's okay to take time. I'll see you soon.